Hello, BlizzCon 2014. Thank you so much for coming to the Blizzard Cinematics panel. We have a great panel for you today. My name is Mike Kelleher. I'm a CG supervisor on the Cinematics team. Before we get to the panel, let me introduce the lovely people around me. To my left is Mark Messenger. He is the director of the Warlords of Draenor pre-rendered cinematic. Next to him is Taryn Gregory, our head of our Machinima group. And on his left is Hunter Grant, our lead animator for the Machinima Cinematics team. To my right, Chris Tunig, our art director on the pre-rendered Warlords of Draenor cinematic. Laurel Austin, our lead artist on the Lords of War cinematic sequences. And down there at the end, last but not least, is Doug Gregory, our director for the Lords of War sequences and our overall visionary for the project. Well, we have three different aspects of Blizzard Cinematics here on the stage with you today. We wanted to do something a little different this year. Typically, we tend to focus on the high-res, very high-profile pre-rendered cinematic, but something very special happened at Blizzard Cinematics this year. Several teams within Blizzard, creative development, sound, and cinematic itself, they merged to form a new group that's going to be focused on telling bigger and better stories in our universe. We call that group The Forge, and we're very excited to tell you about it today. So we have a large breadth of that group here, not everybody, but most of them, and we want to talk about their efforts, all of the Forge's efforts, on the Warlords of Draenor expansion. So before we can do that, we really have to go back to the beginning of the year of 2013. When we were first talking about this, we were talking about the end of D3. Even though the game wasn't out yet, Reaper of Souls, our team was finishing the cinematic. Taryn, your team was actually finishing the 5.2 patch, Thunder King patch. And then you guys started talking about the 6.0 expansion. You started exploring ideas.
Yeah. No, we explored a lot of ideas, didn't we? And sort of the glue throughout all those versions we tried was that there would be this mystery figure, this lone wanderer who would be Garrosh, and he would somehow influence the Orcs of Draenor to take a different path. And we tried like this big tent idea with the Council of the Clans, where you'd have all the orc leaders assembling to choose their first war chief, and then this mystery figure would arrive and throw off his cloak, and he would be Garrosh, the man from the future, and somehow lead them down this different path. But I know, it was like the big tent wasn't quite big enough, basically, right?
No, it wasn't a grand scheme. I mean, we chased a lot of different ideas, and you're probably wondering why we have Chromie up on the wall. It was because in idea exploration, I actually had pitched that we have the Time Walker Chromie have the whole vision of what was happening in Draenor as a flashback to put it in the present and to finally get a gnome in a pre-rendered cinematic. But at the end of the day, we had to do our research. We went back to Christy Golden's Rise of the Horde novel, and we were experimenting exactly the moments, maybe the Siege of Shattrath, maybe that's a good moment to revisit cinematically.
Right, trying to go epic.
We got to go epic. We got to do something huge. But we started to gravitate towards what really was the most seminal moment in Warcraft history, which was the moment that they drank the blood of Manoroth. The Orcish Horde became the Orcish Horde that invaded Azeroth in Warcraft 1. And what better of a moment to have times change than right when it
Exactly.
mattered.
Just the perfect seminal moment to change Warcraft history. And, Grommash, of course, was the first guy in line to say, yes, I'll drink the blood there of Manoroth. And so, that kind of set us up for, him becoming very much more important in our movie and in the expansion.
So he became the focus, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
So you have your idea, but we should say, maybe a lot of our players don't know this, but we have to pitch these ideas back and forth to each other all the time. And what's that experience like?
It's fun. What we normally do is an animatic, which is where we will edit the storyboards together with temporary sound effects and temporary music, and it's just to get a flow of things. But as you can see, we also go old school. Like we tacked all the boards up onto foam core, and I pitched it. I pitched it probably like 5 times to our creative people, and they came in. We'd actually pull the tacks, move things around. It was a way for us all to get on the same page and come up with something we were really excited about, and then we took it to the animatic stage after that. So.
So you have an idea. It's focused. You're starting to get there. We have our beat boards and our pitching here. We get our animatic get going, and now we have to start thinking about actually developing all that. So I think we have an example of sort of the one version of the animatic here. We start talking about concepting at that point. And we start thinking about what kind of assets are going to be needed for the show. And there were also some goals for this show that we wanted to do. Chris, we had some very specific things in mind for this one.
That's right. You know, with the Mists of Pandaria cinematic, we actually had a much more lighthearted tune. You know, there was some humor in it. And because of that, we pushed stylistically a little, you know. It was really reflected in what we were going for in the look. Now here with the Warlords of Draenor cinematic, you know, we were going for something much darker. And so we decided, you know, let's go back to, you know, what everybody expects of us, which is the hyper-real look that everyone's come to get accustomed to. So we made the call and really homed in on that.
Really push it a little bit farther this time around.
Apart from that, one thing we focused on was capturing the subtleties of the character performances. I mean, we knew we're going to have orcs with big jaws and big tusks, and they were going to be close-up and lip-syncing, so we had to make sure that that really worked. So that was one thing we were really conscious of from the start.
So we have all these assets. You're seeing some of the final models and textured assets here on the screen. We had armies, we had helmets, we had weapons, had every kind of imaginable. But there was one asset I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about today that is in the cinematic, which is the Iron Star.
The Iron Star,
okay,
yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that.
It wasn't always an Iron Star.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't an Iron Star. It was like a gauntlet of power or something. We were like, Garrosh comes back, and how does he impress everybody? Well, he's the man from the future. What does he show them? Is it a power gauntlet? Is it a rocket launcher? Like, does he fire a missile at Manaroth or something? Or, you know, at one point we had the idea of having these war drums, and the orcs would slit the drums open, and then out would pop these mystery weapons, right? So we were trying all kinds of stuff, and then we're like, wait a minute. Garrosh, he just broke out of jail, basically. The guy can't, like, bring something through time with him, except he could bring a concept. He could bring a technical concept. And so that's where we started talking with the game team about using the Iron Star. They were like, yeah, this is going to be, you know, in the end of Mists of Pandaria, and it's going to be really big in Warlords. So we thought that was perfect. And so we looked at all the art that they had, and Chris Tunig and his team took some of the art from there, and they sort of started working on making this a pre-rendered asset.
That's right.
So we have all these concepts here from the game team. Then we have a few of our own concepts. Here's a catapult. Deals to be in the background. And then we have our final Iron Star Ballista, which took a very prominent role in the pre-rendered cinematic. Here's the final model, and actually here's the turntable of one of the last surfaced assets that we used for the show. So let's leave you in concepting for a little bit. Let's go a little wider. We have to go back to Lords of War. Before we can talk about Lords of War, Doug and Laura, we have to talk about its predecessor a little bit, which was the Burdens of Shaohao. Why Shaohao? Where did that come from?
At that time, I was part of a group called Creative Development, and we have a lot of different folks under that umbrella, but one of those folks or directives is our publishing directive, which basically takes care of things like the comics and the novels and things of that nature. So there was a day that we were invited to go see Dave Kosak speak about what Mists of Pandaria was really going to be focusing on and what kind of lore we would be trying to, you know, to put some muscle behind. And Dave was dressed in the full regalia, man. He was you know, Sage Speaker Cho, man. It was amazing. And such a nice little pocket as well. And so leaving that, I was just like, man, that was so cool. If we could just animate or illustrate that, I think we'd have a win.
And that's Laurel, that's when you got involved. You sort of fell into this a little bit.
That is when I got involved. I was doing a tour of duty down in cinematics for a while, and that's just what we call it when we visit from another team and do a bit of work for them. And I had finished my illustration. I had a little bit more time left, so I thought, oh, I'll draw a panda. I mean, everyone's drawing pandas. I might as well do one too. And it was this panda.
This panda right here.
And Doug had been walking right by my desk that day. He said, how's it going? And saw that my natural sort of blockout style, when you put it on a piece of parchment, it looks a lot like old-time kind of Asian brush painting style stuff.
I'm an opportunist.
Yes.
You draw one panda and you end up here.
Yes, indeed.
So we have those. We start to form assets into this show, and we're going through. Xiao Hao was originally designed to be less cinematic. It's supposed to be like a scroll that went down, and the story just played out from there.
Yeah, it was going to be a lot simpler. It was basically you're just panning down these scrolls, and Xiao Hao will pop up here, and he'll pop up there, and he'll do a little something while the narration goes. But it was a much, much simpler idea.
Yeah, the thing we were originally tasked with is kind of just doing a proof of concept, and the original VO thing we had from Dave was pretty direct, and we thought we could just get away making it like a storybook. So we thought, hey, let's do it like a scroll. But as we carried on and about 6 months into this, working on it a little bit here, a little bit there, the new stuff that was coming in from Dave became a little bit more cinematic. There was a lot more coverage. The narrator, Jim Cummings, Cho, was basically talking for the Monkey King and Xiao Hao, so you wanted to have that much more cinematic coverage.
So it became very much more cinematical as it went through. Interesting. So now that we have Xiao Hao undergo, so we have to talk a little bit about, here's some of the boards, original boards, and then Laurel, your final art. Xiao Hao is out. It's a success. And we start talking about supporting a product that hasn't been released yet, Warlords.
Yeah, it's still, you know, it did pretty well, and we thought, man, if we could actually get one of these things out before the release of one of the major expansions, I think we could really see a jump in people's interaction with it.
And you had these two stories. You had Duratan and Ural.
That's right. Originally, we were just going to concentrate on these two young warriors and their interaction with the Savage Land. But, man, you know, that was kind of going to be up to the writers to explore. I had a vacation to finally take.
Xiao Hao was a lot of work.
Wiped me out.
You deserved a vacation.
All right, so we'll leave you on vacation, and we will go to our third section here, Machinima. Machinima is, you're working on the 5.4 Siege of Orgrimmar cinematic, and that was a real change, and also it sort of indicated the first sort of Warlords content in a way, didn't it?
Yeah, it was a landmark moment for us, both story-wise and technologically. When we were working on the Siege of Orgrimmar trailer, as you can see, we did an animatic with actually just screenshots from the game when we were prototyping it. We like this format for this panel because it illustrates how these things were all being done simultaneously. We were already working on the pre-rendered cinematic for Warlords of Draenor while we were working on the 5.4 content. As a result, there were little allusions to like, well, this is where it really begins. This is where Garrosh is becoming a villain. This is where, you know, all the threads are being laid, including this subtle allusion that I thought I was just being a total lore nerd myself when Terranzu challenges him on the bridge and is like, you know, your father dabbled in power beyond reckoning. Where is he now? I was thinking, no one's going to understand that, but it turned out to be this big your mama diss that everyone kind of universally understood. But that was actually us trying to allude to Grommash way before the expansion was even announced, you know, just like start thinking of Garrosh's dad because it's coming in a big way. And Garrosh, of course, was the underpinning to almost this entire experience for us.
Yeah, Garrosh is by far my favorite character, and what's really cool is that we were able to take him and basically evolve him over time, and he started out as a normal orc as anyone else. He was this brown orc, same model as any other orc, and at some point in time, the WoW team actually created a brand new model for him, but it was still kind of the old tech that we all know as everything, all the other models and all the other characters. But at one point after War Room Horde, Taryn and I decided, you know, let's see if we can push this a little bit more because...
Do a test, right?
Yeah, because we have these pandas who have now really upped the ante. And so we decided to try and remodel Garrosh, but just enough so we don't break the look of WoW. But at the very same time, what we did not know was Team 2 was, or the WoW team was revamping all of their characters, starting with the orcs.
They had already started work on the new character models, and one of the first ones they did was the orc, and the very first time we saw it was Garrosh in 5.4.
Yeah, and thankfully, we actually got word of it in the middle of production, but we got word just early enough so that we could kind of steer clear of anything that would cause us issues. So we used like our version of Garrosh and then
transported it onto the newest Garrosh.
Yeah,
and resulted in the performance that was led by Hunter, a heroic effort by Hunter and his team to bring that performance to Garrosh in 5.4.
Yeah, all the animators did a great job. Our lead tech artist, Chris Evans, did an amazing job on it, and we created a whole new rigging system for actually Garrosh himself.
He has a lot more emotion in his performance in that cinematic than anywhere before.
Yeah, more control in the face than we've ever experienced in Machinima.
Well, yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is we have to match what the game team does. And so we had to build this whole new system to bring it up to that level of the pandas and all the other new characters.
Great, great. Well, that was a success. And let's go back to pre-rendered for a minute. So now we're talking about characters.
Yes.
We're talking about modeling is well underway. We're now into the fall of 2013. Concepts have been completed, and you can start to see some of those results of their final models here. Here's the cup, for example. We have an example of the Gorhao in its final texture. And we are thinking about the things that have to be done for the cinematic, and there's one particular challenge, I want to say. Oh, I should mention this before I go. This is our set, and it was built almost like a Lego kit, which has these individual pieces, and if you look carefully, you can see that those pieces have been replicated and duplicated and rotated around, and still it managed to look like a complete and very convincing environment. So, but before we get after that, we have one big challenge, which is Mannoroth.
Mannoroth, that's right. Mannoroth was a chance for us to visit an old Warcraft 3 character, right? And as we like to do, you know, we were hoping to really get in there and do quite a bit of an upgrade pass to him, you know. Here we have a character that doesn't have any lips, doesn't have any eyelids, you know, so it really doesn't give us that much to work with. So we started taking some passes in concept design, you know, iterating some ideas, and then as we showed them in dailies, we actually had a bunch of guys approach me afterwards and say, you know what, that starts looking like not Mannoroth anymore, right?
They were attached to that character.
Yeah, I mean, there's some sentimentalities that come with the character, and it's a fine line to walk. So we actually pulled back a little bit, and just to make sure we're not losing the essence that is Mannoroth. I mean, he still went through a whole number of upgrades. A sculpt pass, he got the new shaders, new textures. We brought the technology into 2014, but out of all the assets, Mannoroth is probably the one asset that's closest to the Warcraft 3 cinematic.
Well, you mentioned that the character doesn't have lips, it doesn't have eyelids. That obviously getting a performance out of this kind of character is very difficult. And actually, I think this is a good time to bring up the fact that we do a lot of reference for this. We do live riff.
Live ref, yes, live video reference, which looks very silly, but is actually really, really useful because you're not worrying about anything except ideas for performance. You don't care what it looks like, though we do enjoy it. And with Mannoroth, it was important because Mannoroth, you know, is really all body language. We don't have a lot to work with in his face. And so, you know, you'll see coming up here my wonderful
I have a
performance.
GIF of this at home.
But it's really for work. It's not fun. But honestly,
He would do this outside of work as well, though.
Honestly, it is really valuable because, like, with Mannoroth, we were trying to figure out how do we lift him up a little bit. I mean, his early lines were like, you know, so arch, so supervillain, right? It was like, oh, you are all my slaves, and you know. And it was like, well, couldn't he be a little more savvy than that?
A little smarter.
Yeah, couldn't he, like, kind of come out and go, you know, you would reject this gift, and I see you have brought a lot of guys with you, and what's going on here, you know? Just a little acknowledgement before he puts his foot right in the trap. So anyway, live reference is actually a really valuable tool for figuring this stuff out, and also fun.
Well,
Call you Markaroth from now on.
You can get a lot of performances very quickly, which is great. And pre-rendered is not the only one that uses this technique. Machinima, you guys use this technique as well, correct?
Yeah, all the time. And
This is my second favorite GIF, by the way. I love this one.
That's wonderful.
unfortunately, that shot was cut. Yeah, we use it all the time. It's an absolutely invaluable resource to us where it really helps us define performances, figure out timing, figure out logistics of the shot. And what I really love about it is that we can figure out things that from people acting out the shots where you wouldn't necessarily think of a certain action. You wouldn't think, that's how I want to do it. That's how I would animate it. But you might get this little nugget that somebody did, a little twitch, a little cock of the head, and it makes all the difference in the world.
It's really rapid discovery, rapid iteration, rapid, get an idea out there, see it, see the value in it, pursue it, and it really helps us maintain a speed, in our production.
Yeah, and the best thing is it lets us figure out everything, what not to do. Like, we had a fight scene.
That's very important.
Yeah, we had a fight scene, and we figured out about 100 different ways of how not to do the fight scene.
Well, okay, so while we're talking about things that we discovered, there's something I want to know about, which I'm sure that everybody else does as well, which is I want to talk about the shot that called back to Warcraft 3. How did you guys come about that? How did that happen?
Well, we were searching. We were searching for something at the end that would really be a clincher, that would make you feel that history is being changed. And Taryn and the storyboard team and I were all messing around. You had kind of an inspiration or a question in your mind.
Yeah,
right? You know.
what had happened is Mark was working on storyboarding this sequence, and having been a big fan of the early Warcraft cinematics myself before I worked here, the moment I saw that we are killing Manaroth again, that Gromosh is killing Manaroth again. This is the second time. What happened last time he killed Manaroth? Manaroth exploded and killed him. If we don't address that, it's a plot hole. It makes no sense. You know, the red shirts like me in the audience will be like, wait a minute, that's not right. That should have killed him. So
right.
we needed to answer that question. That's when we started jamming on this idea of, whoa, what if?
Well, like you said, if we don't address it, it's a problem. If we do address it,
It's awesome.
Right, you know? So we were like, you know, the animators worked really hard to line them up. If you look at the Warcraft 3 movie and you line it up, the silhouette of Gromosh is pretty darn spot on to what we created for the next one.
Yes,
so it really emphasizes, you know, last time Gromosh had no one. This time history has changed because...
Garrosh is right there to intervene from time repeating.
It did change. Well, it's not in the same location that it was in the Warcraft.
No, that's true.
We're in a different location, and actually, Chris, this location had some challenges of its own, right?
Yeah, it did. So we knew that the backdrop here would be the throne of Kil'jaeden, and it was going to be a moonlit setting. And we also knew that we're going to have a whole bunch of orcs, an army full of orcs, each of them carrying a torch. So that added a little lighting cue to the mix. And then we had green glowing blood pools that we had to deal with. And we felt that between all of these, you know, there would need to be some wrangling done because, you know, you don't want to mix that much color, that much saturation, that much light.
You don't want it to look like Vegas.
You got it.
Yes.
So what we do is we break down the entire cinematic into little drawings. It's called the color script, and we're trying to address here both lighting, color, and mood too, from shot to shot. And that early on gave us very quickly a good impression of where we needed to pull back a little bit to let other things shine a little bit. And this way we were able to kind of even things out across the board.
Fantastic. So let's go back to Machinima and just put us in context. It's towards the end of 2013. It's actually last year's BlizzCon, which was going on, and we had Warlords of Draenor is now announced, and of course that meant that there needed to be a cinematic that went along with that. And Machinima, that fell to you.
Yeah, we're usually tasked with the challenge of trying to create, you know, these trailers to announce a product that is still very much in early development. As you can see here, this is the animation edit that we were working on. The whole project was probably only really in production for about 4 weeks prior to BlizzCon, and we really had to find a way to do a lot with a game that was just starting. And we kind of gravitated toward the orcish clans. Again, we had the new models for the orcs. We had a few environments to put them in, so we went back to one of the pre-rendered story concepts. You know, instead of the tent, instead of Shattrath, there was the idea of a Dark Rider, and it kind of came back around on the wheel again, as far as like, yeah, let's have Gromosh be the rider, going through the lands of Draenor that we can show, and gathering the Blackrock clan and the Bleeding Hollow clan, and all of these clans together to become the Iron Horde.
Yeah, I mean, the hardest thing about this trailer is to showcase a lot with very little, and thank the light for orcs, because that's all we had. And a lot of what we got to do was kind of smoke and mirrors. We faked a lot. You
really didn't have very much as far as the zones or anything as far as the game was concerned.
No, we really had nothing. And
let's talk about that last shot, that one. That was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the very last shot came from the Alex Horley art.
Right. Initially in the storyboard, it was just an army on a hill. But right around the same time, the Alex Horley art had been released internally. We saw their silhouettes, and we're like, that would be really cool to try to recreate. However, we didn't have any of the warlords except Gromosh.
That was it.
Except Gromosh.
Yeah,
so we
We did have Garrosh, but he's not a warlord, but he's an orc.
So when we don't have the assets, we fake it.
Yeah, Garrosh is actually in this shot, if you can pick him out.
Which one?
He plays Black Hand.
Oh.
And with these guys, if they didn't have hair, we put a wig on them. If the cowl for Durotan came from the very first shot, basically, of the female orc that we just slapped on him and made him look like Durotan. And Gul'dan was from our pre-rendered cinematic. He was a previs asset that we just kind of put on a stick and walked him up.
So while this, this image looks stylistically cool, the truth is there was no other way to do it, because if you flip the lights on, if we have the breakdown,
Oh, I've got it.
you can actually see just how
Check
cheated
that out.
Oh,
here
the
from
horror, the
blood.
horror. It's amazing. You guys did a very good job. That was a great cinematic, and it works very well in that shot. So we're moving on. We're going to go back to Lords of War here for a minute. We're at the very end of 2013, going into 2014. Doug, you come back from vacation for a little bit of a surprise. Not 2 stories, 5.
Yeah, I mean, literally, I stepped off the plane and came to BlizzCon. Mickey Nielsen, my boss at the time, head of publishing, and I had a signing for the book of Tyrael. And we were both sitting there together for a good hour and a half, and he looks over at me and says, "Hey, buddy, remember how when you left there were just 2 stories? Well, there's a little surprise for you. We got 5. And you're going to be directing all of them. Good luck."
Vacation over.
Vacation very over. I thought I was going to coast, the rest of the way through the end of the year, through Christmas, but we immediately started on things the very next Monday.
So they're now focused on the Warlords, obviously.
Yeah, and rightfully so. Honestly, as cool as the other 2 stories were, it was really great to double down on these characters that you were going to be spending a lot of time trying to conquer and really trying to understand who they were and why you wanted to take it to them.
So we should mention that not all the Warlord stories were made into cinematic. Some of them remained in the comic idea that was at the very beginning, right?
That's right. A lot of these Warlord stories actually started off as comics. We're going to do most of them as comics, including like the Grommash one. But as we started developing everything for the 2.5D, we yanked some of them and we kept Gul'dan and Blackhand, which are up right now, by the way. You should go check them out. They're amazing. Alex Horley did fully painted art. It's brutal.
They're fantastic, and I think they're both out, so you can get those. So now that we have a story, we have Warlord stories. Doug, you start to draw just little boards, just tiny drawings and working back and forth with the writers. What was that like?
So the publishing team is all writers except pretty much me. I'm the one that draws somewhat. So I'd be in all these meetings with these guys, and they're talking big ideas, and they're awesome ideas. But then they'd go back to their desk, and they'd start doing other jobs that they had, and I'd be kind of left with these ideas spinning through my head. And I would just start doing these little thumbnails to kind of break down the story, and I'd pitch them back to the writers, and in some instances, they'd just absorb it and keep going. It was fantastic collaboration.
A lot of fun. Imagine it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So we have some of those examples here, and then those boards get turned into layouts, and then Laurel, it starts to fall to you from these layouts. Here's an example of Grommash on the tree, and that needs to be turned into the final art that is there, right there.
Yep. At this point, I'm sort of trying to develop the art style that we're going to end up using for these stories. And initially, the reference that Doug had given me was Sin City, a very dark, high contrast, very, very violent, very like kinetic style that's really sketchy and kind of loose, so that it's sort of accomplishable in the time, but underscores what a dark and difficult and savage place that Draenor is. So it was...
I want to talk about one particular piece of art in here, which is the ogre with the parasol, which is really kind of interesting. How did that come about?
He was a favorite. So the ogres at this point in Draenor's history were not the ogres, the sort of stupid ogres that you'll meet in Azeroth now. It was like at the height of ogre civilization at the time. They were very much like ancient Rome. They were lords of all they surveyed. They enslaved the orcs for a long time. So when Doug was talking to me about this character, we really wanted him to be unique. And the reference that we came upon was Marlon Brando from the island of Dr. Moreau.
I think we have right here. He's very vicious, but...
Yeah.
Marlon Brando?
Marlon Brando. You know the one where he's... There we go. He's just got all the, he's draped in his sun protective stuff. He is a very, he's an old man, and he has done many horrible things in his life, and so he's going to sit back and wait.
I wanted somebody that had a history of being evil. I mean, so long so that he could be really relaxed and kind of reserved in his evil, you know, live in his skin comfortably. We were going to have so many ogres in these shorts that they needed to be differentiated somehow.
Oh, that's
for me,
a fantastic reference.
Yeah.
So we end up with this. We start working on the final art, this beautiful line style and everything. But towards the end of the year, there's, well, we should say that this art is extremely violent at one point.
Initially, that we were told that, like, Draenor is not a nice place. Go as far as you want with the violence, and Sin City is quite the violent reference.
Yeah, I mean, we were looking to take it too far. I mean, we were off the chain at that point. We were allowed to go anywhere we wanted to.
We can go very far when we want to.
And we managed to go too far. So we were reeled back in.
We
Too
need back
savage.
a little bit.
So we start replacing some of that, helmets for heads, swords for plowshares, that kind of thing. And we end up, towards the end of the year, there's just one more surprise. for you
One
guys.
little tiny thing. It was in our final Greenlight meeting, and we had just watched the first Gromosh edit, and everyone was really happy. We were thinking, this is a great story. We all love to tell it. But there was a little voice from the back of the room that said, oh, guys, I don't know about this black and white stuff. The little voice belonged to Chris Metzen. I don't know about this black and white stuff, guys. This is not, I think it has to be in color. This isn't Frank Miller, this is Frank Frazetta. And that's quite a reference to get, you know, Frank Frazetta, one of the best painters of the last 50 years. So we thought,
Well, I mean, we're all in black and white, and Frank Frazetta is masterful color.
yes.
So we did what we could. You know, we thought we'd take the short route. We'd do some little color shifts here and there, and we'd arrive at something that was, you know, a
Yeah.
nice little solution. But
Yeah.
you
Not
just
so much.
realize really quickly, you know, when it's Frank Frazetta, there's no, like, halfway point.
You got to paint it. You got to
just gotta
paint
go
everything.
for it.
The long road is the only road, indeed. So,
Right.
all right. Well, we'll leave you start worrying. You're starting to look for help, I imagine. We'll go back to pre-rendered. Pre-rendered, we have we're in lighting. It's the beginning of this year, and we've started on effects. Has started to work on some of their effects for Manaroth, specifically for his glaive, which is right here. Some explosions, various demon blood. You can see some of the R&D that's done here right now. That was an interesting journey, and we started working on that. And of course, Manaroth has his own effects. He has effects on him. His head is on fire for it. This is one of my favorites. And then this was, whoa, a little bit too high, but
Too much fuel there.
yeah, a little bit. I like that one. I don't know why you didn't like that one. All right. But there was still, we were getting close. The lighting's there, and we're done. Are we?
So we think. So we're, you know, really approaching that finish line, and we're patting each other on the back. We're thinking, job well done. And then head of technology, Mark Brown, drops the bomb, and he goes, well, you know what, that blood, specifically the scooping shot of Gul'dan, it's not working, guys. It doesn't look right. And we look at each other, and we look at the screen, and we say, you know what, this is not Blizzard quality, and we go back to the drawing board. And I
It
think
was not
you
good
went-
enough.
Right, exactly. You went to the store.
I did. I went to the store. I think I bought about 30 different kinds of shampoo and soap, and I think the lady behind the counter thought I was crazy. You can see some of the reference. This is what we do, and we know we have to go back to something. We start over from the beginning, and this was our reference, live ref again. My hands smelled wonderful for a week.
Yes, they did.
Yes. But we did this. We tried and shoot this. We have these different kinds of reference. I think, we were very concerned about what the demon blood should look like. It's green blood. We don't know what it looks like. We're not sure. What's the viscosity? What's the density? Can you see through it? Should it glow? How much should it glow? Should it have a sheen? Those are the kind of questions that we had to answer. And this kind of stuff, although silly, like you said, sometimes could be very helpful. And I want to thank our lighting effects teams, and of course everybody on the pre-rendered cinematics for waiting us out on that to really get there. And there's the final shot, and I think
There you
everybody's
go.
happy with it.
That's pretty good.
So, moving on from that, the pre-rendered is done. Our work on pre-rendered is finished, but Machinima's work is just beginning. It's the beginning in their work for Warlords of Draenor, and you're not being asked to just do one cinematic, but 6.
Yeah, it was a wonderful, wonderful challenge going into Warlords of Draenor that, as you can see up on the monitors right now, previous expansions had contained only certain numbers of big, important story moments, starting with the Wrathgate in Wrath of the Lich King, and then a couple in Cataclysm, and then maybe a few more. But going into Warlords, we knew we wanted to do more than we've ever done before, and we want them to be spread out throughout the content. We're not going to drop any spoilers here. The game's not out yet. Maybe some of you have seen it online, maybe you haven't, but starting next week, when you quest through, level 100, there will be a cinematic about every, zone and a half as you finish the zone questing, and then you will be rewarded by seeing exactly what happened. And there's a little bit of snippets here, a little bit of hints of the animatic process when we were developing these things.
No spoilers.
And one of the most challenging parts was, as we've been talking about this whole time, everything's in development simultaneously. The art assets are in development simultaneously. The game is in development simultaneously. So we had to do our best to work with what we had when we had it. So we started with the orcs again, and then we had to chase hand in hand like a baton race with the World of Warcraft team as when new character models came in, like Khadgar.
Sometimes that causes problems.
There were versions of this movie all the way to the last minute where he was just shirtless super Khadgar until we finally, wrapped up the Khadgar model and were able to put it in.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of run into the same issue with all these 6 as we did with the announcement trailer, because again, the game isn't done, and again, thank the light for orcs. But the interesting thing is, because we're working in tandem with the game team, we knew we had to do 6, and we needed this grand finale, but what is it going to be? We don't know what it's going to be. We don't know how long it's going to be. We don't know how many characters. We don't know anything.
It was kind of a circle out on the schedule as far as like epilogue. And they hadn't made the zones. We hadn't figured out the story. It's like, there's this movie coming. We want it to be at the end. Like, when you're level 100, we're going to have to make it at some point. And it was probably only, the last 4 weeks before the Gold Master was going to be locked down for the game's pressing. And the animators had to jump in and make the entire movie in like 3 weeks.
Yeah, we basically, thankfully, we had really, really good storyboards for it. But we kind of had to figure it out, and we dogpiled on it just to get it done, and it turned out really, really great, actually.
Yeah, great.
And we're really looking forward to you guys checking out the content in Warlords of Draenor, of course, dropping next Thursday.
All right. Yeah, Thursday. Wow. So, Pre-Rendered has wrapped up their work, Machinima has wrapped up their work, and we have to all turn, actually everyone, it's important to realize, all the members of the Forge now turn collectively to start helping out the last of our projects here, Lords of War. Let's see, Mark, you went on to direct one of the pieces. Duratan. Machinima, you started to work on the overarching story for it as well.
The 3D intro.
Chris went on as art director, and we all joined in and we tried to help you guys and get that done. We have obviously some challenges, but one of the interesting things that's kind of happened in the interim while we've been talking about these other groups is that Murad, who is going to be the narrator of these stories, has really become his own story as well. Isn't that right?
And I think, yeah, it did actually. I mean, we always knew we were going to have some glue tying all these together, but I think it was pretty much just going to be like a fireside thing, nobody in particular. But then as Murad came to the forefront, and it became a story about Murad going and talking to Varian about these things, we just realized, man, it's not going to be any fun if he's just literally going there and just spitting these stories at them, unless he's got something at stake himself. So by the end of it, Murad becomes the heart and soul of the entire piece, and that's when poor Terran's group gets dragged back in for another round.
Involved, right?
Yeah, it's just one thing after another. It's really exciting, and I love it. We had just wrapped up the X6, Warlords of Draenor pre-render. Their crew had been working on the 2.5D motion story for months and months and months, and then we had to go right into making these intros as quickly as possible. And the challenge was to find the through line, the heart, the soul, make sure that the story was really working. A great effort from Doug and Metzen and Afrasiabi and James Waugh and Mickey Nielsen, everyone trying to find the through line to make sure that there was a core story in Murad and Varian that held this all together, made it feel like by the time you watched the whole thing, it was one cogent story.
And there really was no shortcuts there either. Once again, we rewrote when we had to rewrite. That was it.
Absolutely. It went through a lot of versions, inverting the values, flipping, who's really telling the story, and I think we arrived at a wonderful solution.
It's a great solution. It's also an interesting look. This is a very somber-looking piece for Machinima. Machinima has a very specific mission, which is to evoke the game, right? Not to break that bound.
Yeah, absolutely. Historically, our Machinima efforts since Wrathgate have always been to be seamless, as far as like you're in the game, the movie fires, and it's as if you're in the exact same world in the exact same place. And that's where we've actually tried to put most of our efforts. However, with Lords of War, since it wasn't going to exist in the game, it was instead going to exist side by side with the artwork of Doug and Laurel's group, then we had to consider some different options. So we did a look dev test with Variant here to see what it would look like if we pushed the values a little bit more into that deep, dark, resonant space. And everyone really liked the results of the test, and we ended up using that technology to make those intros.
Yeah, the film noir look was brilliant. I think it just took everything to another level.
I think it looks great. And so we now have all of our art. We have our story arc from Machinima. We should talk a little bit about how this is put together. These pieces are the pieces that are created by the artist, Laurel, and your team, and then they're projected on a simple geometry, and we call this group, newly formed group within Cinematics, the motion story team, or the 2.5D team sometimes. And this is a technique that we've been using for a while, hasn't it, Mark?
Yeah, we started using it on Diablo 3 and Reaper of Souls. Hearthstone, you guys are aware, is very successful with the technique. Basically, you're taking drawings and you're wrapping them around simple geometry, projecting them. And it just gives you the opportunity to do a little bit of camera movement. It gives you a little bit of dimensionality. It's kind of that bullet time effect, kind of like with the circle cam out there. And it's just another tool in our arsenal that we started developing with the Lords of War team.
Well, it's worked out very well. It's sort of the 2.0 version of what Xiao Hao was. But there's another component to this, not just the layers that you see in front of you, but there's the motion of Motion Story as well that we have to talk about. Laurel?
Yeah, these are really an interesting challenge, especially compared to like the Hearthstone stuff. They have to tell a much more direct story than a lot of the stuff we've done in the past with this technique. And in order to do this, we realized there are really two different kinds of animations we have to use, where if you keep it more like illustrations, people don't expect it to be fully animated. If it goes too far and it ends up looking too much, or like there's too much movement, people will think, oh, well, why isn't this fully animated? These aren't, there isn't a keyframe for every single, thing that happens. So we found we could go really far in the sort of ambient animations, like dust in the air and snow and ogre heads on spikes.
Pretty much the environmental elements and ambient.
Yep, pretty much those kinds of things. But when it came to the character movements, we had to be very, very selective about the kinds of things we chose to do. And usually it was when a character makes a large movement, we would do, like in this shot, we would do one keyframe that would crossfade to another keyframe. And there would be quite large movements within not very much imagery.
That's right. And it has sort of have its own uncanny valley, if you will, in the same kind of way. It has to look like a storybook, not like an animation.
Yep.
So we have that. We're actually catching up to the present. It's now the end of 2014, and the Warlords of Draenor has its premiere. We finished our work, which is fantastic. We had the premiere. It was great. Thank you. We had that in two locations, in Gamescom in Germany, and Mark, and I think you and Chris went to that.
That was awesome.
Fantastic.
In addition to that, we also had our own event, which was up in Los Angeles, where we had a simulcast of sort of the premiere of the pre-rendered Warlords of Draenor cinematic, and I believe the first Lords of War also made its debut at that point as well, which was well received. And after that, we basically have a Lords of War, cinematic every other week, and pushing it and so forth as we go towards the end of it, which is all 5 of them. They're very successful. If you haven't watched them, I encourage you to do so. They're available on YouTube, and they're a lot of fun, great stories. And that's the end of this. But it's important to remember a couple of things I want to mention, which is that when we have an announcement trailer like this or anything that comes out, we have a lot of people that are involved, and that includes sound. It wouldn't be a cinematic without the sound or the music that's behind it. Absolutely not. It's half the experience, if not more. I'd like to call out localization, because this is something when we announce a product like this, or we have a cinematic premiere, there may be as many as up to 13 different languages that we need to provide that cinematic in, which is a fantastic amount of work to get done. And I'd really hats off to them. And the last group I'd really like to point out is video and post-production, which is also part of the Cinematic Forge team, and they do a great job.
Thank you, Lucas.
Everything you see around you at this facility is done by VPP, and it's really great for them. So, and the last person I really want to thank is I want to thank you guys. Thank you so much. If we would do this just for you, and we're so happy that you're enjoying it, and we wouldn't be any fun without you. So we were very excited that you have that passion for these kind of products, and we'll keep making them as long as you like them. We've left a little time for questions, so we'll try and answer your questions. I think we have about 10, 11 minutes here for questions. If you don't get your question, I'm sorry about that, but we will be on the side of the stage, and we'll try and answer anything we possibly can. Thank you again for coming, and have an awesome rest of your BlizzCon. Thanks very much.
Hello.
Hi, Mom.
Hi.
It's Darren's
My
mom.
name is Judy. But you guys were talking, and you said that there was something about testing, where you showed things to people, and they changed,
Oh,
and
the
it was
pitching
good?
process. Right.
How do you get testers?
Oh.
Do you take volunteers?
Well, I think that we love to bounce ideas off of everybody, right? But sometimes there might be confidentiality right there that we can't bounce it off of everybody. I don't know.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay. But we tend to bounce it off, just to answer your question a little bit further, we bounce it off of just about anybody we can find a story about, you know.
Oh, yeah. There's always a kind of a trusted circle of people all throughout the company where it's like you want to have pools of new impressions. So at a certain stage in development, you'll show this group, and you'll get their first impression. That's really valuable, because once you see it the second time, it'll never be the first time again. Then you'll use another group within the company, you know, even if it's bonds, you know, even if it's BIIS, you know, technology. These first impressions are so valuable that they cannot be understated. So.
Hey there, so I really enjoyed all of the Lords of War cinematics, but I gotta say it was kind of a sausage fest. Do we have any plans for maybe seeing a cinematic for Rel or any female characters at all?
That is a really good question.
Have you actually seen any of the spoiler cinematics that we were talking about?
A little bit.
Yeah, we actually were really excited to be able to use Urel in the in-game cinematics a lot to kind of try to answer the question that was asked, as far as we really did want to tell Urel's story, but it was really important for us to establish the villains of the expansion, since nobody knew who they were going to take on. That's kind of the direction it went. But Urel has been a wonderful, wonderful through line, and we're really looking forward to doing more with her throughout Warlords.
Hi, I was wondering if you had any plans to do the Warlords style motion comics for any of your other franchises, particularly the science fiction oriented ones like StarCraft and Overwatch, and how they might be different compared to your fantasy oriented franchises.
I don't think I can say too much about it, other than I can say that all the other teams at Blizzard were really excited by Lords of War. They really were very encouraging. As far as whether it's going to be different or not, Doug and I have already started to talk a little bit about what does a motion story 2.0 look like. And we started some testing of our own just for fun, just to see. I mean, I think it's been a challenge just to try it ourselves and see, like, what else could we do to this story? How could we make it different? How much more immersive can we do it, and how much can we bend it before it breaks? Kind of.
Yeah, I mean, it's still a brand new car in the parking lot at this point. We've just really test drove it this time with Warlords, so I think it's going to be fantastic to see how it is received by the rest of the company in the future.
Hello. If you did a project like Lords of War or Burdens of Shao again, what would you do differently?
Ooh. I don't know, Doug. First, I'll give you that, and then I have an answer too, but I want to give you.
You know, I don't know that I would do it any differently. The experience is valuable as it is for me. I mean, this was all like a big learning curve. Shao was a massive learning curve, and then Lords of War, an even bigger one. I honestly don't think I would do anything different at this point, because I got to work with all these guys, and that was an experience worth having 100%. So I'm just looking forward to the next one, whenever that one will arise.
Yeah, it'll be nice to treat any given story differently based on its needs, just going forward into the future.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going to say. I don't know if I do anything different. I do a heck of a lot more of them, really, is what I would like to do. We set up a pipeline for this. We set up a team for this, and they are chewing at the bit to do more.
we do postmortems where we also reminisce about the process and look for opportunities to improve, obviously. So.
And I would just also say that if we end up doing something for a different game, that's going to send us down a whole new road with all kinds of new discoveries. So wait and see.
Hi, how you doing? I'm really impressed with Lords of War and specifically King Varian Rin's model seemed to have much higher fidelity than his model in game. Was that built from the ground up specifically for Lords of War?
It was not built from the ground up. It was actually the base new human model. We did take that as the base and then worked it with some artists to try to move it toward the Varian Rin that we're familiar with. But that was done on the cinematic side because at the time they were prioritizing models. They had to make sure that the ones in the chain in Draenor were the ones that were getting done for the expansion, right? And Varian, unfortunately, wasn't that high in the queue, so we had to take some initiative there. We took their new human model, we pushed it into a Varian so he could stand side by side with the new Maraud, which they've got to be on the same fidelity level to exist in the same space. So that's how that came about. Is that
we actually worked really closely with the WoW team to make sure that Varian looked like Varian and that they were happy with what we were making for them.
Hello. I wanted to ask if you guys ever get to hook up with merchandising at all, simply because what we see in the things we can buy over there, they're always that very polished endgame. And when you guys show your planning, your drafting, like the Panda, you know, rough model, to me that stuff is so interesting and has so much more character. I mean, I want a Got Goo t-shirt, so just saying. But is there any way to tap into that creative process and bring it to something we can own ourselves?
That is an amazingly good question. I know that I can say for one thing that we do work very closely with marketing. Everybody up here does. We trade ideas back and forth. If they want something from our cinematics, we provide it at the highest fidelity we possibly can from any of our groups. As far as unpolished work, I don't know if anybody's ever talked about something like that before. It's kind of an interesting idea. Well, I'm going to put that in my back pocket.
Yes, thank you.
In terms of production art, there's always the art books in the collector's edition that'll show some of that.
True, that's true.
But if you need a Lords of War art book or, you know, a Xiaohao art book, you know, just write to Blizzard Licensing.
One more thing, to be fair, we actually, with all the sculpts that get done, that actually goes through our department a lot before it actually gets to the final product. One of our, was it Nick actually art directed the Tracer, and it goes through the process of modeling it and posing it, and until it gets into a place they like it, and we go downstairs to our sculptor who makes it really cool.
Yeah, Brian Frey, the sculptor on that Tracer statue, actually sits right next to me in the anvil. And he works directly with licensing at all times. So there's quite a bit of crossover.
Hello, I was wondering if you were actually planning on making any of the tools that you developed available to machinima artists or people who are interested in making cinematics of their own. It would be interesting to be able to do stuff like this, or at least learn how to do stuff like this in a much more efficient fashion.
Absolutely. Having come from the machinima community myself before I worked at Blizzard, the tools really do make or break the ability to create machinima. But what's been going on with the Warlords of Draenor and the recent development internally with machinima, it's become much more classic CGI as far as pipeline. Like we have you know, the animatic phase, the storyboard phase, the animation phase, everything's being key-driven by animators, Hunter and his team. That's then being rendered and lit by lighters and finishers. It's actually not so much in the space anymore of, you know, the tools do the work. It's actually just a mini pipeline of the high fidelity. So there actually isn't a whole lot of smoke and mirrors anymore behind the scenes for us. Like our machinima tools aren't really that different from the public as far as like the power. So that's kind of a question. I would love to see a time where we could support the machinima community with more technology, and I need to talk to the World of Warcraft team about ideas for how we could supply that to the machinima team.
Hi, everybody. I'm a huge fan.
Hello.
I was just wondering if you guys were planning to do more 2.5D, and I'd like to encourage that.
Oh, would you?
I would.
Yes, I think we can say we're very excited. Of course, we cannot say whether we are doing or not, but I think everybody is raring and chomping at the bit.
Hi, also a big fan. I was really surprised and impressed with how much camera turning you're able to do with the Lords of War cinematics using projections, and I wanted to know if you got all that mileage out of one drawing, or if you had to paint multiple views based on how much you turned and stuff like that.
That's a good question.
They are pretty much, any given shot is generally one painting. Yeah, there's often a lot of panning around, but yeah, they're always one painting.
A lot of layers, though.
Yeah, a lot of layers.
We have some really great guys, Matthew, me, John Stiles, and Jason, who you just heard, and James, some phenomenal guys that work so hard to make all that seamless for us.
They do a little bit of background painting sometimes. We'll bend that camera to the absolute edge of where things start to break. Quite often we'll do that as a play blast in a software like Autodesk Maya or something like that. Try it out first before we go down the road of actually trying to finish the shot. And where it breaks, then we pull it back just a little bit.
And as they were mentioning earlier, the magicians who are working on the actual motion of this are doing all of these things as far as the Overwatch introduction that was all, 2.5D, and the Hearthstone cinematics. And, it's the same crew that's doing all this wizardry that I personally don't even understand. It's amazing.
First, just want to say, great job. Really enjoyed it with Warlords of Draenor. I was wondering, though, that this cinematic was longer. Are you limited by time, or will you make it longer if there's more of a story to tell?
I think you would make it longer if you needed to. And in our case, it's really important to kind of assess where you really find that sweet spot. And I'll give you an example. Originally, we had like 50 shots, and the thing was like 5 minutes long, right? And we thought that's perfect. It's the right way to go. And we just decided, just as an exercise, let's cut it down to the point where it makes us cry, where we feel like we've lost things that are important. So we did that. We cut down to like 30-something shots, and we cried. It was bad, and we said, wait a minute, what are the things that are missing that we really miss? And we put some back. And so we ended up with around 40 shots, and I don't know how long it is. It's
about 4 minutes.
Yeah, and so, we really do think about that. It's like we want the right amount of time. We don't want to just burn time. We want it to be quality time, right?
Exact amount of time. I think we have just time for one short question if anybody's got one. Okay. Well, thank you again for coming, and we really appreciate it. If you have any other questions, we'll be on the side of the stage.
Thank you.
Thank you, BlizzCon.
Thank you all. Thank you so much.